It's Friday, it's the 11th of July. I'm Moon Gon-young. This is ARIRANG News live from Seoul, our top stories today. As the Park administration lays plans for a successful remainder of its term, President Park again faces a tough political decision with some of her cabinet minister nominations. At the conclusion of an annual high-level dialogue, China and the United States promise closer cooperation on ways to persuade North Korea to give up nuclear weapons. And a mounting crisis at one of Portugal's biggest banks and signs of a deepening economic slowdown in Europe sent tremors through financial markets across the world. And it's starting to take a toll on the Korean economy as well. We'll have those stories and more, but first, right here in this country. President Park Geun-hye, who made attempts to renew dialogue with the two main rival political parties this week, has an important political decision to make. She has secured bipartisan agreement for passage of her key reform and economy-related bills, but the main opposition has asked that the president consider withdrawing some of her cabinet nominations. Here's our presidential office correspondent, Choi Yoo-sun.
President Park has often been criticized for her lack of dialogue and communication with the opposition party. She countered that criticism this week by meeting with the ruling and opposition party's floor leadership for the very first time.
The president and both parties' floor leaders met for talks, and the fact that we are going to meet on a regular basis means we are restoring politics.
A major development from Thursday's talks was an agreement to pass within the month a bill designed to prevent a repeat of tragedies like April's deadly ferry accident.
The policy chiefs of the two parties will start negotiating the bill within the standing committees, with an aim to pass this special legislation on the Sewol-ho ferry in the July 16th plenary session.
The ruling and opposition sides also agreed to seek passage of the government's post-ferry disaster reform bills and bills aimed at revitalizing the economy in August. But with 5 of President Park's 8 cabinet nominees now confirmed by the parliament, the opposition is requesting that the president specifically reconsider 2 of the 3 remaining nominees for their alleged thesis plagiarism and false testimony. Although the president can appoint her cabinet without parliamentary confirmation, there's a big political risk if she goes ahead without considering the opposition's request. On the other hand, the president also cannot afford further delays in her government and public sector reform plans after her 2 failed prime minister nominations. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
And moving on, the U.S. and China say they see eye-to-eye on North Korea's denuclearization. Wrapping up their 2-day annual talks in Beijing Thursday, both sides agreed about the important urgency of curbing Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program, but they remain divided on how they will approach and persuade the communist state to do so. Here's our Kim Young-gil with that report.
The U.S. and China promised closer cooperation on denuclearizing North Korea at the 6th round of U.S.-China strategic and economic dialogue. The U.S. says China shares the same strategic goal and that Beijing must use its unique role to persuade Pyongyang to give up its nuclear ambitions. However, the U.S. State Department declined to comment on whether Washington and Beijing had agreed to enforce sanctions on North Korea more rigorously.
China has been an important partner in the implementation of sanctions, and even as recently as last year, they took a number of important steps.
China's top diplomat Yang Jiechi said Washington and Beijing reaffirmed the importance of realizing the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula through consultations, and that 2 countries can do more to relax the situation. During a meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said both Washington and Beijing agreed to work harder.
But I do want to emphasize that we reached agreement that we need to both do more, and we are prepared to, in order to try to move North Korea on the subject of its denuclearization.
Washington has long pushed for Beijing to use its status as North Korea's only major ally to pressure Pyongyang. North Korea has conducted 3 nuclear tests since 2006 and has been threatening to conduct a new form of a nuclear test. Pyongyang has repeatedly expressed a willingness to reopen the 6-party denuclearization talks without preconditions. The 6-party talks involving the 2 Koreas, the U.S., China, Japan, and Russia, have been stalled since late 2008. Chimyeong-gil, ARIRANG News.
More than 60 years of separation have made North and South Korea 2 very different places. And although Koreans from both sides of the border share the same language, their understandings of one another is very limited. And this is most true among the younger generation of South Koreans who will be looked upon to lead if and when unification occurs. It was with this in mind that the Korean government hosted a special youth camp on Thursday, and our Shin Se-min was there.
This 24-year-old North Korean defector, known only by his family name Kim, fled his home country because of economic hardships. His first attempt at defecting ended in failure, and he was sent back to the north, where he ended up serving time in a prison camp for fleeing. But his desire for freedom never waned, and Kim finally made it safely to the south 7 years ago. Facing some 100 South Korean middle school students at a youth unification leader camp held on Thursday, Kim and 1 other North Korean defector shared their stories as part of a program organized by South Korea's Ministry of Unification. The goal is to raise awareness among younger South Koreans about their neighbors to the north and prepare them for possible unification in the future. Now that Kim is legally a South Korean citizen, he says he wants to study.
I want to study so I am prepared for the future, especially when the 2 Koreas unite, because I have to help those North Koreans adjust to the changes.
And until that day comes, South Korean students have goals of their own.
Spreading the vision for unification is something I continue to do with my friends, so eventually I can go to the north and better appreciate our history through cultural assets.
Although we were brought up under different political systems as Korean people, it is our job to embrace all people until we can freely commute anywhere on the peninsula.
Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Now, shifting gears, global stock markets slipped on fresh concerns over the health of a leading Portuguese bank. The latest crisis in the European nation is raising fears that the country could fall into financial trouble once again. Our Hwang Ji-hye tells us more.
Stock markets in the United States and especially in Europe took a hit on Thursday. Markets in Europe dropped across the board, while Wall Street recovered most of its nerve at the opening of trading, with the Dow, Nasdaq, and S&P 500 losing around 0.5%. So what is haunting the market? The soundness of Portugal's top bank, Banco Espírito Santo. The tension centers on Espírito Santo International, the largest shareholder in the bank. It allegedly missed a debt payment this week and was held responsible for accounting irregularities. Amid the feeble pace of economic recovery in Europe, analysts say the shock in global stock markets shows that investors are still very worried about the overall financial health of the region. That's also raising fears that Portugal might face a crisis again just about a month after emerging from a bailout. Portugal's regulator halted trading at the troubled bank after its share price crashed 17%. The Portuguese government insists that the bank is solid and that the drop in stock prices simply reflects trouble at the parent company. Investors, however, are skeptical, saying they have heard such reassurances in Europe before and that the size of the problem remains unclear. Hwang Ji-hye, ARIRANG News.
And shifting our focus to the conflict on the Gaza Strip, world leaders are calling for restraint as UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon has already appealed for a ceasefire between Israeli and Palestinians. Our Kwon So-ah has more on this report.
The U.S. says it's willing to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. The White House said U.S. President Barack Obama told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on the phone Thursday that he's ready to help end the escalating hostilities on the Gaza Strip. He also reiterated that Israel has the right to defend itself against Palestinians' rocket attacks. Secretary of State John Kerry spoke to his Egyptian counterparts, trying to make him use Egypt's influence in easing the situation, as the country played an important role in brokering an Israel-Hamas ceasefire 2 years ago. The surge in rocket fire was triggered amid an Israeli crackdown on Hamas members, which began after the abduction and killing of 3 Israeli teenagers last month. A suspected revenge murder of a Palestinian teenager followed a few days later. Hamas has reportedly launched over 550 rockets into civilian areas in Israel. Israel responded with over 500 airstrikes, part of their Operation Protective Edge, launched earlier in the week. UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon made a passionate appeal for a ceasefire during an emergency session, saying Gaza was on a knife edge.
Today, we face the risk of an all-out escalation in Israel and Gaza, with the threat of a ground offensive still palpable and preventable only if Hamas stops rocket firing.
The UN chief called on the international community to work with Israeli and Palestinian leaders to stop the situation from escalating and said the region cannot afford another full-blown war. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Now, jeonse prices in Korea are fast closing in on record levels, and this is according to KB Kookminbank's real estate statistics. Well, for those of you who are not familiar, jeonse is a unique system in Korea where tenants, instead of paying rent, cough up a hefty upfront deposit, typically a large percentage of the property's value, which is then refunded in its entirety or renewed after a set period. Well, the nation's jeonse to purchase price ratio climbed to a near 69% last month, a single percentage point shy of its highest level on record, which was set back in October 2001. The southwestern city of Gwangju showed the highest at 78%, followed by the southeastern city of Daegu. Seoul was at 64%. Analysts attribute the upward trend to a growing number of people feeling less inclined to purchase because of uncertainties about the real estate market. World Population Day is marked around the world on this Friday, July 11th, but data shows Korea faces a bleak future in this regard. A study by the Korea Institute for Industrial Economics and Trade shows Korea's competitiveness will soon begin to wane due to the shrinking number of economically active people due to the fast aging population and low birth rate. Well, it also says Korea will fall into the lower ranks of OECD countries in 16 years. Korea's competitiveness through population is expected to fall to 21st place by the year 2030 from 17th place in 2010. The institute says the nation needs a strategy to boost the birth rate before it becomes an extremely serious economic and social conundrum. Well, another science fiction fixture has become a reality. Korea's LG Display, the flat screen maker of LG Group, has unveiled an 18-inch flexible OLED OLED panel. Now, the panel can be rolled into a cylinder with a radius of 3 centimeters without affecting its functions at all. The display maker also revealed a transparent OLED panel the same size with a transmittance of 30%. Now, LG plans to develop both transparent and rollable panels of more than 60 inches by 2017, and all this in a bid to lead the race in the display market. On another note, the World Cup in Brazil reaches its climax this weekend with Sunday's final. Well, no one ever expected Korea to still be in it, but everyone had hoped that they'd put in a stronger showing than they did. Head coach Hong Myung-bo has stepped down to take responsibility, but the deep-rooted problems with Korean football remains. Our Song Ji-sun tells us what they are.
Someone had to take responsibility, and this time, it was 2 people who withdrew from their positions. The vice president of the Korea Football Association stepped down on Thursday, along with head coach Hong Myung-bo. The seat is empty for now, but it won't be an easy position to fill. 10 managers have held the highly coveted seat over the past dozen years, after Gus Hiddink led the Korean squad to a 4th-place finish at the 2002 Korea-Japan World Cup. But each has only stayed for slightly over a year on average, after 1 or more losses in international matches that brought them under fire. Selection of the national team coach has generally been a top-down decision from Korea's Football Association. Its technical committee must provide professional insight to the process, but lacks the authority to influence the decision-making process. Now, the incumbent president of Korea's football governing body says that will change.
We plan to reform the technical committee so the team can perform better on the international stage. We'll also restructure all levels of the organization so that it better caters to the national squad's needs.
Those reforms and the selection of the candidates for national team coach must take place soon, with the next international match set for September and the Asian Cup in January just 6 months away. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
Well, it's Friday, which means it's our real talk. Now, each summer is a battle at the box office here in Korea between local films and Hollywood. However, following Korea's strength in recent years, U.S. imports have taken the market by storm this season, churning out hit after hit as no true Korean hits has emerged for months. And here to make sense of the local industry's recent drought and the complicated standoff at the box office is our very own film critic, Piers Conwin. So, Piers, after a string of highs, the Korean film industry has taken a downturn, more or less. Things got a little more heated this week when 20th Century Fox, they moved up their release date of their saga, or the Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and local filmmakers are up in arms, scrambling to come up with their strategies accordingly. What would you say is the problem, and is this bad news for the entire Korean film industry business?
Well, it's never good to see business go down. People always want to see kind of an upward trend. When people see a downward trend, it's a natural thing to worry a little bit. However, whereas local filmmakers have generally been very nervous about any change just over the course of a few months at the box office, they seem to be taking a little more in their stride these days. Because of course it's natural that you'll have these kind of ebbs and flows in a market. But to give some figures to the current predicament in the industry. Around the same amount of tickets were sold in the first 6 months of this year compared to the first 6 months last year, which is about 100 million tickets. So that's 2 tickets for every citizen. However, last year the Korean share of that was 56.4%, and this year it's down to 41.8%. That's a really big drop. So there's kind of a big deficit there. It's still a lot of money. Still a lot of tickets for a domestic industry, but compared to like these record performances we had in the last 2 years, people are just obviously a bit disappointed by that.
Right, but business is bound to pick up, though, right?
Yeah, I imagine that in the next few weeks we're hitting the peak summer season, and that is a time when Korea can really make up some ground.
All right. That said, do you think local filmmakers will have any takeaways from recent results?
For me, there's 2 things that I think the industry could address. Whether they want to take my suggestions under advisement is another thing. One big thing is there's been too many high-budget films. This happened around 2006 and 2007 as well. The industry became very confident, started churning out more big hits, and then suddenly they had even more high-budget films. And once business went down, that rise in overall budget prices compared to a downturn in the business, created a massive negative return on investment. So I'm worried we're seeing the same thing this year. There's a lot of big period films, a lot of high budget films, and a lot of them are just not hitting their break-even point. So perhaps if they could kind of focus more on mid-level stuff, that would be good. The second thing is that we have a few kinds of films that have been doing well in the last 2 years, and so suddenly studios are scrambling to kind of replicate those successes.
Right.
So each studio is making a few period films and a few noir films, and so that's one thing, having so many of each genre. But oddly, the release schedules have been stacked so whereby the early summer season has seen all these noir films.
Right. There was a Target and Hard Day. And
right. And so those two were the early ones, and they were very successful. A Hard Day is still doing very well. But all the ones that came after that, like High Heels and No Tears for the Dead, suddenly audiences weren't interested anymore because it seemed like more of the same. And the same is about to happen with period films. We'll see 3 big period films released week after week. So this kind of scheduling seems a little tricky.
Well, there's kind of a dilemma that local distributors face. So tell us more about that.
Right. This standoff with Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, it kind of came as a big shock for the industry. On July 4th, 20th Century Fox Korea announced that they would be moving up the release date of their blockbuster from July 16th to July 10th, yesterday. So that's a very short notice. And local distributors for films that were also being released this weekend were just furious. The Korean Film Producers Association filed an official complaint, and many studios, production houses kind of had these kind of statements where they were kind of really angry and irate about this. And so what it means is that a big blockbuster is coming in and is taking away all these screens from smaller releases. So we're seeing the Arnie Schwarzenegger film, Sabotage, was supposed to come out this week. It's being delayed 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
And even the Confession, the new Korean film, was pushed up a day, so it would have a day without going against Planet of the Apes.
Right, because this is such a powerful film and one that a lot of viewers have been looking forward to.
Absolutely.
So you don't want to compete with that, right?
Yeah.
Well, so what is on for offer for viewers at the moment then?
Well, earlier than expected, we have Dawn of the Planet of the Apes.
Aside from that.
And that film, is the buzz, as you say, is very high. The previous film was very successful here, and this new one is, I'm guilty. I saw it yesterday, but it's really good, and I think audiences are going to get a kick out of it. The other film, which I briefly mentioned already, was Confession, this new Korean film that, again, it's a noir, so I think it's going to have a huge problem at the box office with so many things that came before. However, it's really, really good. It took me by surprise. It's a terrific, kind of more character-focused drama. Ju Ji-hoon in particular has this wonderful performance in it, and I highly recommend it. However, I don't think it's going to stick around for a long time, which is a real shame. We also still have The Divine Move, another thriller, but Jung Woo-sung, starring local thriller, and that did quite well last weekend, but again, that's going to suffer a steeper drop than usual because of the Planet of the Apes release.
Right, right. So what are some films that might put Korea back on the back at the top of the block office?
Well, we'll see that starting to happen on July 23rd. So this season of the year, where you have the last kind of week or two of July and the first week or two of August, that's the real summer holiday season. Koreans go on holiday at that point. Most people are off work. It's also the hottest time of the year, so everyone wants to get to the theaters. And historically, this is when Korean films really, really dominate. They're the biggest weekends of the year, and it's always Korean films on top. The Thieves, The Host, Snowpiercer, Haeundae, these are all films that were released at that time. So for 4 weeks, we will have a big blockbuster each week from Korea, and there's just no competition from Hollywood. So we have Kundo, The Age of the Rampant, big period movie. Next period film is going to be Roaring Currents. Another period film is The Pirates, and then we have Sea Fog, which is kind of a naval thriller, kind of action thriller drama.
So do we have 3 period films and 1 action?
It's more of a thriller than an action, I think, but there'll be action elements to it. But they're all very, very big releases.
All right, well, we look forward to that. And I should go check out The Planet of the Apes first. And because you said it was good, right?
It is, that and Confession. We're lucky to have two good new films this week.
And 1 from Hollywood and 1 from Korea.
Right, but there's no question who's going to win.
All right, Pierce Conran, thank you so much for this week. We'll see you next week.
My pleasure.
Happy Friday, everyone. It's very hot outside with the daytime highs up into the mid-30s for some regions, but with less humidity today compared to the last few days. And it's partly cloudy with a bit of a breeze. It's also cooler in the shades, but not much, which should tell you just how sunny it is outside. So make sure to apply some sunblock before heading out. And with this scorching heat, the regions where there were heat wave alerts continues and even expanded, especially in the southern regions where tropical nights are expected as well. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 33 this afternoon, while the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 32 and 31 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops over to 27, while Dokdo peaks up to 29, while Mangungang tops up to 33. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and I hope you have a cool Friday.
Well, that's just about all from me at this hour. I'm Moon Gun-young. Check back with us at 4 p.m. Korea time for Business Today.